it appears that Trump's legal team are actively, as well as ABC News and others, are actively watching with us, right, and videotaping it and intending on potentially using it for stories or for the case that's coming up where I'll be testifying and yada yada.
So this is not like a private, he's not talking in a bar and we've intercepted it somehow. He's not like talking to the mirror. He's talking to his audience on TikTok, Rhonda.
It really is stunning, and I don't know if anyone involved in this trial can stay quiet. I mean, all of these characters seem to want to get their platform out there.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen.
That's exactly what it was, and you've been indicted over that?
I object to you getting working TV.
Welcome to the Trump Trials Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey, and I'm here with my colleagues Rhonda Colvin and James Homan. And while we are moderately comfortable here in our studio, the former president, Donald Trump, is, at this moment, in the icebox. That's the courtroom in Lower Manhattan where he's on trial facing 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. And it's this courtroom that he tells us repeatedly in his hallway comments is very cold. But if he's not careful, Rhonda and James, he could end up in a totally different type of icebox. He could end up in jail.
The clink,
because he keeps breaching the gag order. We will talk about that in a little bit. We're also going to talk on today's episode about what's happening in court and how the prosecution is developing its case, how they're painting this portrait of a hush money scheme. And our colleague and friend Ashley Parker, senior national political correspondent, will join us to preview an upcoming witness, someone we rarely hear from publicly who could likely take the stand, someone who's very close to Donald Trump, Hope Hicks. So let's dive in. Trump was found this week to be in criminal contempt of the gag order in 9 instances. I have the gag order right here and the ruling of contempt. 7 were on his Truth Social account. 2 were on his campaign website. James, how big of a deal is this finding of criminal contempt and the punishment?
This is the first time a former president has ever been held in criminal contempt of court. That is a big deal. And it followed basically repeated brazen ignoring of an order from a judge. It's a big moment. In the grand scheme of things, the penalty right now is small. He's only fined $9,000. For Trump, that's nothing. It's not even a drop in the bucket. But it puts Trump on notice, and the judge clearly is frustrated. The judge had another gag hearing today, Thursday, and the prosecution continues to allege violations. And it does feel like there's a game of chicken being played where Trump is basically daring the judge to put him in jail.
You know, $1,000 for each instance, Rhonda. But the judge did point out that it would be better if the fine could be more commensurate to Trump's wealth, but he's stuck because he doesn't have a lot of options. What are his options?
Yeah, the judge doesn't have a lot of options. In fact, the reason why it's $1,000 per violation is because that's New York state law. So if people are wondering, wow, that's just a drop in the bucket for Trump, it's because the judge has to comply, obviously, with the state code. So it's not high at all, but it is the one real step that this judge has taken when it comes to contempt of court charges. And as James mentioned, there's another batch that the prosecutors want the judge to weigh in on, a batch of potential violations. So we'll see where that goes. But it shows you that this is going to be an ongoing problem throughout this trial, that Trump's posts on Truth Social or things that he says are subject to be violations of this gag order.
And I'll admit, I'm sort of sympathetic to some of Trump's pushback to the gag order, which is other witnesses are attacking him. One of the things he got criticized for was saying that David Pecker was a nice witness, and which was pretty neutral. Judge Merchan said he wasn't that bothered by it, but it's one of the things that the prosecution asked for him to be gagged over.
Can we play that tape?
Yeah.
I would like to hear your reactions because it's important to hear how he said it, where he said it, and maybe why he said it.
Right.
Let's roll the tape.
Yeah.
No, he's been very nice. I mean, David's been very nice. He's a nice guy.
Trump made essentially a campaign stop before court early one morning. He went to a construction site, talked to reporters, and he was asked about David Pecker's testimony, and that's what he said. So what's the concern here? What is the prosecution saying about saying he's nice?
Well, the gag order says you can't talk about any of the witnesses. And basically the prosecution is saying he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's sort of opening the door to say mean things about Stormy Daniels or Michael Cohen, the two star witnesses who are coming up. And the judge said, well, whatever. He gets a pretty neutral statement. And the prosecution saying, no, Trump knows exactly what he's doing. I mean, the other thing that Trump's lawyers, Todd Blanche specifically said on Thursday morning was that Biden made a joke, President Biden, during the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend, and he said Donald Trump is in stormy weather, and the lawyer said it's not fair that his opponent in the election, we've never had anything like this, but the sitting president and his political opponent is able to talk about Stormy Daniels and Trump can't. The judge was a lot less sympathetic to that and said you can attack Joe Biden without needing to mention Stormy Daniels. And Todd Blanche didn't really have a good comeback for that. So I'm sympathetic to Trump feeling like he's in the midst of a political campaign and he has to sort of watch his words carefully. He is a candidate for office. On the other hand, you're not supposed to talk about the jury. So it's saying that,
let me just go through what the four
Yeah.
instances that they talked about today in court are. One is that Pecker tape that we played. One instance, he called Michael Cohen a liar. Another instance, he talked about both Pecker and Cohen. And then one instance, Rhonda, Trump criticized the jury. And Judge Merchan seems to have the least tolerance and patience for that.
That's right, because if you look at jurors, they are people who are randomly selected. They are fulfilling this duty that they have to. They're giving up their life. They're giving up their work for an extended period of time. So it does appear that the judge is not really taking any sympathy for Trump on that part. But we did see in the order that was earlier this week when the judge concluded that he did violate the gag order, the first group of violations, he did open the door that he may release Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen from protection from the gag order because they have been out talking about Trump as well. They are very public figures at this point. So he may remove them from the protections of the gag violations. But the jury, of course, these are just regular citizens just doing their duty.
Can I read to you something that came from the judge's decision here about holding Trump in contempt and saying that he violated the gag order? It says, "It is of utmost importance to this court that the expanded order not be used as a sword instead of a shield by potential witnesses." So it can't be used as a weapon by Cohen and Stormy Daniels.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to play for you what Michael Cohen is doing because Cohen said last week, I'm going to stay quiet. I'm not talking on social media anymore. And he sort of clammed up on like X, on what was known as Twitter. But he kept talking, streaming live on his TikTok account. Look, I want to play you guys some of this tape. Let's watch.
It appears that Trump's legal team are actively, as well as ABC News and others, are actively watching with us, right, and videotaping it and intending on potentially using it for stories or for the case that's coming up where I'll be testifying and yada yada.
So this is not like a private, he's not talking in a bar and we've intercepted it somehow. He's not like talking to the mirror. He's talking to his audience on TikTok, Rhonda.
It really is stunning, and I don't know if anyone involved in this trial can stay quiet. I mean, all of these characters seem to want to get their platform out there. This is kind of textbook Michael Cohen, too. If you go back to the early days of the Trump campaign, for the first campaign for president in 2015, Michael Cohen was out there. He was, known as the fixer. A lot of journalists had interactions with him. I think James could probably talk on that. And this feels, just a part of who Michael Cohen has become. And he doesn't appear that he's going to stay quiet. I personally, it's not televised, of course, but I can't wait for the readout of what the transcripts say when he's on the stand, because you almost can envision a shouting match between Michael Cohen and Trump when he's in there, because they both won't stay quiet.
Everyone sort of dislikes Michael Cohen. I mean, he's not, even the prosecution realizes what a flawed witness he is. The federal government chose not to bring charges against Trump in part because Michael Cohen is such a problematic witness with a history of lying under oath repeatedly. And this is one of those things where it's this really seedy guy who we all have to acknowledge is seedy, who is their star witness. And that's why you have to, if you're the prosecution, lay the groundwork and the foundation with all this other stuff so that you can't just dismiss Michael Cohen and then get found not guilty. And so we see a prosecution that's very, very mindful of that.
Let's talk more about what actually is happening in court in terms of the case building in a moment. But I just want to stay with this gag order question because the judge, it's so much more complicated because Cohen won't stay quiet. And then the other aspect of this is that the judge is very mindful that Donald Trump does have rights of free speech. And the judge even said, he's running for office. He recognizes that he's running for president of the United States. So he's trying to limit the gag order. But at the same time, James, the judge has another step, right? Rhonda, you said it's $1,000 or it's jail. So what would it take to throw the former president of the United States in jail, Rhonda?
Well, according to New York law, I looked it up yesterday, it says, and this is a quote from it, for contempt, there may be a fine not exceeding $1,000, so that's, of course, why it's $9,000 for Trump, or imprisonment not exceeding 30 days. So if the judge did go the imprisonment route, it would be no longer than 30 days, and it would also be in the jail of the county where the court is sitting. And of course, the county of Manhattan is in New York County, so it would be in a jail there. But this is all at the discretion of the court, the discretion of the judge. We'll have to see if he goes that route. But we do know politically that Trump has sort of been talking about possibly going into jail, being a political prisoner.
The visuals would be very effective for Trump. However, the experience would not be enjoyable, to say the least, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk more in a moment about what is happening in court and how prosecutors are building their case. Stay with us. Let's talk about what's happening in court this week and how prosecutors are building their case. Now, witnesses we've heard from so far include the attorney for Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who negotiated the money to get their stories about alleged sexual encounters with Donald Trump. Also, the publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, and even the executive assistant to Trump, who knew about his personal contacts, essentially his Rolodex. Also, the archivist to C-SPAN, but let's talk about him in a moment. C-SPAN guy aside, what sort of case are these witnesses being used to build against Donald Trump? Rhonda?
Well, for the prosecution, they are trying to build this case that this is also an election interference case. They are using a New York state law to say that the hush money payments are directly tied to Trump's desire to conceal these alleged relationships in order to win the White House. So they're hedging their bets on this New York state law. We've heard from, I think one of the star witnesses this week has been Keith Davidson, who was the lawyer for both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who received the hush money payments, allegedly. He's really had he has the receipts, basically. There have been so many text messages laid out this week between him and Michael Cohen about the payments, about keeping Stormy off of interviews, about all sorts of things. So we're really getting a sense of a timeline, a sense of the relationship between the fixer, Michael Cohen, and the lawyers for these two women. And then also what's been really striking to me is that Cohen kind of feels like he's on the stand. He isn't physically, but his name keeps coming up. And for the defense, that might be a good thing because Davidson seems to be able to paint a picture of Michael Cohen as the bad guy, as the guy who's doing this all on his own. Trump didn't really know about it. This guy is a shadowy figure. There's a lot of crude language in a lot of the text messages that have been released. So it does seem like Michael Cohen is definitely at the center, even though he's not one of the witnesses right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's come across to me that he's been able to trace the trail to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
What do you think, James?
Yeah, and I mean, so to Rhonda's point.
That's what the defense wants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Totally.
like exactly. Emil Bove, the one of the lawyers for Trump, his first question when he got a chance to cross-examine the witness was, before this trial, have you ever been in the same room as Donald Trump? And he said no. And so that's part of the idea that this was Michael Cohen's doing. He was the one who was cutting all these deals. But a lot of the text messages and conversations that Davidson has recalled with Michael Cohen have Cohen saying, the boss is really angry about the story in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks before the 2016 election that kind of flicked at Karen McDougal's non-disclosure agreement, or Trump is seething that Stormy Daniels is giving interviews where she's being kind of coy about her relationship with Trump, and the Trump is going to sue you, and threatening to sue. So the prosecution was trying to use him, even though Cohen clearly was the cutout, to say Cohen made clear he was speaking for Trump. There wasn't hints and nods. Cohen was saying very explicitly that Trump was directing this, and that it was for the purpose of interfering with the election. That the idea was to buy silence until after the election. That this was about suppressing the story so that Trump could win the campaign.
James, do you have the sense that Bove has been effective in his cross-examinations?
Yeah.
To Rhonda's point of like what the defense is trying to push back on?
Yeah,
because there
was,
have been some moments where
right.
It's almost like he should have stopped asking questions, like he kept going maybe a little too far and didn't get what he wanted from the witness.
Well, it's interesting because the part of the defense strategy with Cohen and Davidson and everyone is to just paint this whole world as really seedy, which it is. I mean, this is like this what Davidson does for a living is like basically shake down powerful people for money to keep stories about things that they're accused of doing quiet. And so the Bove, I think, did get some blood when he said, you were investigated criminally for potentially extorting Hulk Hogan over a decade ago to keep quiet a story. And he was like, yeah, but they didn't charge me with anything. And it was like, because basically what he's doing is going to rich people and saying, if you want this story to be quiet, pay me. And so they're trying to, I mean, that is shady. And so none of these are like angelic witnesses. And so I do think that they've scored some points there and of establishing the distance, but that is how a criminal conspiracy works, is that the person who's in charge of the alleged conspiracy isn't the one like having every interchange with every lawyer. I mean, that's why you have someone like Michael Cohen. That's what the role of a fixer is, to keep the principal out of it. So I think it helped lay the foundation to bring Cohen up. We got a lot of insights into Cohen's state of mind. I think some of the questions that the prosecution was asking, usually one of the things you'd want to do in a trial is like get out front, because they know where the defense is going to go. So the prosecution was trying to get at the idea that Michael Cohen, like they don't want the jury hearing it first when in cross-examination, that Michael Cohen was sort of, at one point Davidson thought Cohen was going to kill himself because Trump wasn't going to make him White House Chief of Staff or Attorney General.
Slow down with that for a minute, because that was very alarming, right? So I want you to just kind of like, James' brain moves so fast. So like, this was really alarming testimony that Michael Cohen was so upset that he wasn't being brought to Washington to be part of the Trump administration. He was despondent. He was beside himself. He might have even been suicidal, according to the witness.
Right. And what's funny is I actually remember talking to Michael Cohen at that time, and Michael Cohen telling me, a reporter, like, I don't want to go to Washington. I don't want a job in the White House. I'd rather stay in New York. And I believe Davidson's account over what Cohen told me contemporaneously. Basically,
but why does that matter?
So the why it matters is that Cohen, in this conversation, and for the most part, Davidson has been sort of a dry witness, but he recalls getting this phone call from Cohen while he's shopping.
Distraught Cohen.
He's a distraught Cohen. And so there's the key. He's shopping, and it's like the mall is decorated with like Alice in Wonderland, and he remembers it feeling really surreal. It was this kind of like novelistic color. But the key thing is Cohen says, "I've saved Trump's ass so many times. You have no idea." And he's betraying me by not giving me a big job in the administration, by not bringing me to Washington. And he didn't say I'm suicidal, but Davidson came away thinking, wow, this guy's really down. And that is sort of the mercurial Michael Cohen of like, this is the Cohen a lot of us interacted with during that time, where it was sort of like everything was hyperbole and overstated and like dramatic. And so it does capture Cohen's state of mind. in some ways that's helpful for the defense because it's sort of like, wow, this guy he had an axe to grind, right? I mean, Trump didn't give him this big job that he wanted, but it also gets at the feeling that Cohen had like really gone to bat to help Trump, and it does at least put in the jury's mind like, what other times did Cohen save Trump's ass, and cover up for him?
The prosecution is definitely painting a vivid picture of the hush money scheme and laying that out. And we are hearing witnesses talk about, how it worked, how that was engaged. And the key is going to be really tying it all together and watching the through lines. While the jurors aren't hearing from Donald Trump, they can certainly see him in the room. They're not hearing his voice unless he decides to be a witness for the defense, which would be shocking. But possible, right?
I for journalism's sake, I think he should do it.
Okay, so well, stay tuned for that one. But even though he's not saying anything at this point, the jurors are still hearing Donald Trump's voice.
Yeah.
And that gets us to the C-SPAN archivist, who was one of the witnesses. He was called as a witness to essentially verify information and allow it to be put into record. And it's footage, thanks to the plentiful archives of C-SPAN, footage of Donald Trump himself. So let's roll the tape so we can hear something that jurors heard this past week.
Total fiction. They're 100% made up. They never happened. They never would happen. I don't think that happened with very many people, but they certainly aren't going to happen with me. They are all false. They're totally invented. Fiction. All 100% totally and completely fabricated. Never met this person, these people. I don't know who they are. I don't know who they are. Think of what's happening to our country. Think of what's happened. I don't know who these people are. I look on television. I think it's a disgusting thing, and it's being pushed. They have no witnesses. There's nobody around.
Donald Trump saying, I've never met these people. Now, this is one of a handful of videos that's already been played for the jurors. There are others that have been allowed into evidence. What is he talking about, Rhonda?
Well, this is actually a part of a workaround from the prosecutors because the judge in the beginning of this trial said he did not want any evidence brought forward to the jurors that went over any sort of allegations of sexual assault, that Donald Trump was a part of any sort of sexual assault. So the prosecutors invited the C-SPAN, the director of archives, on the stand. Our beloved C-SPAN is involved.
We have the mug.
Minutes of
Give me
fame.
20 minutes. He got 20 minutes on the stand.
You got the mug right here.
And that,
Yep.
And that was just so that these clips could be brought in that shows that Trump does have a pattern of talking, verbally attacking women who said that he allegedly assaulted them sexually. So that is how the prosecutors are bringing this part of Trump into this trial and sort of working around what the judge had said he would not allow. So
it also, I mean, it shows Donald Trump lying through his teeth, and the defense isn't really stipulating that.
Because who is he talking about?
He was talking about these. They aren't allowed to introduce the Access Hollywood tape, but the jury, so they didn't see the tape, but they heard the contents, they heard the transcript, and they can refer to the impact that the tape had. And so this is all these women who have come forward to accuse Trump of sexually assaulting them, and Trump's saying, "I'm going to sue them all after the election," and being really definitive in his denial. And one of the other clips that the jury saw was Trump describing Michael Cohen as a talented lawyer. And, I think it kind of gets at the idea of like Trump saying one thing publicly and another thing privately. And to your point, Libby, like if Trump's not going to testify, this is the Trump that they're seeing. And it gets at state of mind. It gets at like why he was eager, if he was lying so blatantly in public, why he was eager to kind of like keep this quiet, these two women quiet before the election.
All right, let's talk about the words of the week, because Rhonda kind of hinted at this, and it's going to be very helpful for our understanding of this case. All right, stay with me, guys. I'm putting on my glasses for this. Words of the week are New York election law 17-152. This is a New York state law, conspiracy to promote or prevent election. It's a misdemeanor. And you did refer to this earlier, Rhonda, because it's essential to the prosecutors being able to nail this case and saying not just this is a hush money issue, but it was done to interfere with an election.
Exactly. So this is a little used law. It's a state law that the prosecutors, they didn't reveal that this would be their tactic until last week when they started their opening arguments. But this is something that they have decided to make the center of their argument, that these hush money payments are connected to a larger conspiracy, a larger scheme where Trump wanted to win the election. So they are going to use the state law to apply to that. I think legal scholars are super interested to see if this will work because they are centering their case on it. It's interesting because the defense position that we've seen this week is to counter this argument by saying, look, this is how high-profile people act. This is standard to want to suppress stories that might be incriminating. But we'll have to see if attaching the hush money payments issue to an election interference issue will work for the prosecution and if that will, lead to a conviction for Bragg and his team.
And remember, Trump doesn't have to convince, or Trump's lawyers don't have to convince everyone on the jury that he's not guilty. They just have to convince one or two. And if they can poke at this hole, that this is what rich people do. This is standard operating procedure. This is the seedy underworld of tabloids. That maybe you can convince one or two people that Bragg is sort of in using this statute in a very novel, untested way, maybe overreaching.
Although, of course, the jurors aren't like going home and looking through
They're
their law
not,
books
exactly.
and Googling, wait, hold on, I've got it. New York election law 17-152.
Yeah.
I mean, so they may not necessarily realize how novel this is. The issue, though, is they're going to have to follow down the path, right? A to B to C, wrap that all together, and it leads to D.
And there is at least one lawyer on the jury,
Two.
right?
That's
Two.
true. That's
Yes.
true. That's
So
true.
two of them will
Right.
maybe know this, but maybe not. I don't know.
And when the prosecution talks about it, they make it sound so obvious and easy and kind of course we're doing. Of course, this is you did this one crime in furtherance of this other crime. It's we'll see how that plays with the jury. As Trump said of the jury, it's Manhattan. It's a Democratic jury pool.
All right, well, stay with us. Ashley Parker joins us in just a moment, and we'll get to our reader mailbag. While most of the witnesses we've heard from so far were involved in the alleged catch and kill scheme to bury negative stories about Donald Trump, the witness list is about to get a lot more personal for the former president. That's because one of his closest former aides is expected to take the stand as soon as Friday. Hope Hicks. Now, Hicks was by Trump's side from his 2016 campaign throughout his presidency, and a lot of us saw her much more than we heard her if you weren't a member of Trump world, but we know that they had a very close working relationship. So here to tell us more about what Hope Hicks could provide on the witness stand is our colleague Ashley Parker, senior national political correspondent. Welcome, Ashley. So Hope Hicks is a bit of an enigma to those of us who are outside of Trump world. She was always photographed right behind the president, right by his side, whispering in his ear even. How important is she as a fixture and someone who witnessed the lead up to his presidency?
Well, she's sort of the Zelig of Trump world, right? And she has this kind of fascinating origin story. She ends up in his orbit because she was working for the Trump organization, working with his daughter Ivanka, doing branding and marketing. She had no prior political experience. When he asked her initially in 2015 to join his campaign, she thought he was talking about, a campaign he was running for one of his golf clubs, a marketing campaign. Wow. So that's how she starts. But she has really been the person by Trump's side since the very beginning. And she did take a break in the White House. She left for about 2 years. She shoved it in 2018. She came back 2 years later for the 2020 campaign. But even within all of that, for whatever reasons that we can get into, she was by his side, in and out, a fly on the wall in just about every important decision that happened in Trump world, which means also all of these moments and controversies and scandals that special counsels are interested in, grand juries are interested in, federal prosecutors are interested, district attorneys are interested in, congressional hearings are interested in. So Hope is someone who has actually in certain ways tried to move on with her life twice. She left the White House again, and then afterwards, when he wasn't president, she splits her time between New York and DC. She started actually not a political consulting firm. She started a consulting firm. She hasn't really done much politics other than she worked on Dave McCormick's Senate campaign in 2022. But she keeps on getting pulled back in, largely against her will, because she is always called to testify.
I mean, it's been so many times that she's been called before people asking questions about Donald Trump and the TikTok and timeline.
Senate Intelligence Committee, House Intelligence Committee, January 6th committee. I mean,
But so much
she's
of this
often
has
seen, but some
Yeah.
of those scenes are now all walking in and out of places that she frankly doesn't want to be.
We haven't gotten to hear her, though, talk much about that time out loud, right? A lot of this has happened behind closed doors.
Yes, the January 6th testimony, parts of that were public. A lot of this is behind closed doors. Sometimes, you know, there's transcripts or visibility after the fact. But yeah.
So, Ashley, take us to the time that the prosecutors might be really interested in as they're looking at this moment in the ramp up to the election when Michael Cohen, possibly Donald Trump, we'll see what the evidence shows, we're finding out about these allegations of women who were saying they'd had sexual relationships with Trump. What do we know about Hope Hicks's knowledge or witnessing of some of these crucial conversations?
So I will confess that this is the part that I, like just about everyone who is waiting for her to be called and very curious to see what she has to say, knows the least about. But my sense is a couple things. You know, David Pecker, who ran the National Enquirer, he previously testified that there was a meeting in Trump Tower, I believe in August of 2015, that he said Hope was in and out of, which again just shows you sort of, it's not that she was making decisions. It's not that she was even officially advising. She was just kind of always around and in the ether. But she was in and out of this meeting where he and Donald Trump agreed that the National Enquirer and David Pecker would be the eyes and ears of the campaign and try to kill damaging stories that could hurt Trump. So that is likely one area they're going to want to talk about. Another area is Hope Hicks was the person who was contacted by our former colleague, David Farenthold, when the Access Hollywood video came out. And, you know, prosecutors want to make this case about more than just sort of sexual foibles. They want to make it about interfering in an election. And so it seems like one area they may want to talk to her about is this idea that by the time this alleged hush money was paid, because of the Access Hollywood video, the Trump campaign was very worried about how female voters were going to react to them. And there was a sense that if there's any more damaging allegations, that will hurt his chances to become president. And this idea that they wanted to stop at all costs for political reasons, not because Melania would be mad, but for political reasons, public allegations about more alleged affairs.
James and Rondo, what questions do you have about Hope Hicks' relevance and potential testimony?
I like how Ashley kind of classified this as she's a person who has access. She's a person who's in the middle of the Trump orbit. However,
She's like truly a witness.
Right. She is truly a witness. She's seeing things that other people don't have knowledge of. So she could potentially be very key when talking about meetings, talking about timelines. I'm interested in hearing more on that when she does testify. But it is also interesting to hear you say that she doesn't want this role. She has tried to escape from the White House, escape from the Trump orbit, but keeps getting pulled in. And I was thinking about her testimony. It was an interview with the January 6th Congressional Committee. And they have text messages that she wrote after January 6th where she was angry that Trump did this, said that he makes them all look like domestic terrorists. Yeah. I'm wondering...
At one point, when I was looking at that testimony too, and at one point she says, everything we've worked for is kind of all over, and the only jobs we're going to be able to get afterwards is for the local Proud Boys chapter.
Right, yes.
And again, those were very real, raw emotions on January 6th.
Yeah, she seems like she's really aware of the optics of all of this. So, yeah, just having her there telling whatever she knows is going to be super interesting once we get the transcript.
I mean, I think the prosecutors can use Hope to establish that a lot of the behavior was related to the campaign, that it was sort of like, how do we buy time to establish the fear that existed right after the Access Hollywood tape came out? Can we push this until after the election? The other thing that Hope can talk about that we got some indication of during David Pecker's testimony is that she was involved in some of the conversations in 2017 after he becomes president, along with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, about how to manage these stories and control some of the stories when the Stormy Daniels denial came out. So I think she, because she was with Trump, can speak to connecting, creating this nexus with the former president, and also establishing that it was campaign related or that there was a campaign mentality, which is so important
Which is
to
crucial to the
creating
case,
this, like,
right.
that it was in furtherance, that he did the falsified business records in furtherance of another
And
crime.
I think another thing that's worth mentioning that is not quite to what the prosecution wants, but why I'm so looking forward and curious is Hope, again, is just a fascinating figure, right? She's this rare person in the Trump orbit. She's a former model who eschews the spotlight, right? She's
That's so ironic, right? She's a
Yes.
model who does not want to be in the
Yes,
spotlight.
she never
right?
wanted it.
Right.
She's frequently, or at least initially, was very underestimated, in part, I think, because of her modeling pedigree and because of her relative youth when she joined the White House in such a high-profile role. She's someone who, in this White House that was known for its warring factions and infighting, was well liked by just about everybody. She also had the absolute trust of the former president and his family, and also the respect generally of the media. She's someone who was in all of these situations, as Rhonda was saying, making her such a good witness, but escaped not just with her reputation largely intact, but she wasn't one of these Trump allies who needed a pardon at the end of the day, right? She's not, she's being asked to answer questions, but there's no indication that she herself has done anything wrong. And then, as Rhonda was also talking about, I mean, I always thought about covering Trump and Trump's world as sort of like the Hotel California. You can leave but never check out, or check out but never leave. But like there is this force field. I mean, I feel it having covered Trump starting in 2015, right? Like if he wins it, who knows what will happen. But if he wins again, I think like this will be like over a decade. Like I will have given birth to 2 children, while covering Donald Trump. And I think Hope is a case study of someone who, whatever she does, there's warmth and affection there, and she just keeps on getting pulled back into that sort of like chaotic tornado that sweeps up everything in its path.
How powerful could her testimony and that moment be for Donald Trump to be in that courtroom and have her testifying, recalling conversations, being asked pointedly, as lawyers do, about the actions of the former president? Because, you guys have talked about her testimony to like the J6 committee and others, special counsel, but Donald Trump's going to be in the room this time.
It's going to be uncomfortable for both of them. So after his presidency ends, right, she kind of leaves politics, moves on with her life, but talking to people who know their relationship, they're in touch. They call each other from time to time. She's down at Mar-a-Lago a handful of times. And then there's her January 6th testimony. And again, this is another example where she does not want to be called to testify, but she is, and she does so. In her testimony on January 6th, in certain ways, was quite explosive. And the president was upset about it. He sort of thought she had gone further than was required of her. And so again, I think a rupture would be overstating it, but they have not, my understanding is they have not spoken since that January 6th testimony. And again, people say the relationship is cordial. There's still a lot of warmth and affection there. They think, again, back to the Hotel California, she's never truly out, but I don't think she doesn't want to be doing this. She certainly doesn't want to be doing this while he's sitting however many feet away. He doesn't want her doing this. And it's not like Donald Trump and Michael Cohen, who are now enemies and kind of have that tension and anger, but is a kind of way to get through this moment. Like neither one of them wants to be there, and neither one of them wants to really be hurting or being hurt by the other one.
Ashley Parker, senior national political correspondent, thank you so much for
Thank
talking
you,
with
guys.
us.
Thanks,
All
Ashley.
right, yeah, come back again soon.
Thanks. We'll have to see you when she testifies.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And finally today, our reader or viewer mailbag. A reminder that you can send us your questions to sidebar@washpost.com. Here's today's. Isn't the most important question, when will the Supreme Court rule on Trump's immunity? Could there be a scenario where Trump gets up and walks out of court mid-trial if they decide soon? Oh my gosh, what an evocative image that is. This is not likely to happen in this trial. Explain why, Rhonda.
Yeah, the Supreme Court's arguments over whether or not Trump has this widespread presidential immunity will likely not affect this case. If he gets up and walks out, I don't know. He could, but I don't think it'll work for him on this. That argument is probably going to affect the January 6th federal case, the Jack Smith-led case, and also the Fulton County case, because those two focus on his actions around January 6th.
As president.
As president, and whether or not that was an official act. as president. So we'll see. I
So
don't
this
think
case predates
Exactly.
being
Well,
president.
You can't have
so
immunity for something you did
Right.
before. It doesn't like you get immunity for all things you ever did wrong. This is the criminal conduct in question is before he became president, so it couldn't have possibly
even if
been
it was
an
allegedly in
official
the
act.
service to become president, it was before the presidency began.
Right.
I will say, though, if the Supreme Court rules on this during this trial, the New York trial, I do certainly see a world where Trump may come to the cameras and claim, like, well, the Supreme Court said I have, get out of jail free card, I'm going now, but that's not going to work. But I could see him using whatever their decision is. If it's to kick it down to the lower courts to decide, whatever it is, I can see him using that and telling people that he's immune, but that's not necessarily how the law works.
Yeah, and I do think like the justices. We were surprised by how many of the justices seemed amenable to levels of the argument, but I think none of the justices were in a place where they wanted to give Trump total immunity, which is what he's asking for all things that he did as president. The justices just weren't going to go that far.
But a reminder that a win for Trump isn't just getting immunity, it's also having the justices, if they decide that this bears more conversation, more judgment, if it has to go back down to lower courts, if there needs to be hair splitting on, just what acts are permitted as president and immune and not, that is a win for Trump because it delays the process of so many other trials where people are just waiting to get going as we watch this New York one play out. Well, that's all we have time for. A reminder, once again, you can write to us. It's sidebar@washpost.com, and you can subscribe to our show. Find us wherever you listen to your podcasts and hit that subscribe, or find us on YouTube or youtube.com/Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey. I'm here with
James Holman.
Rhonda Colvin?
and we will see you next week.